So perfect. So welcome everybody. Let's get started. And as I was saying, we are in chapter 3. We're in the middle of chapter 3. So what's happening for context? What is happening in chapter 3? Chapter 3 is where Rabbeinu Bachya is going to give us the 5 factors that are necessary for bitachon to be bitachon. Up until now, he really has drilled into our consciousness that God has 7 attributes so that by logic make him absolutely reliable. And once we understand that, and he went through those 3 times, that's how important they are. Okay, so we have to really have those 7 attributes of God front and center. Now he's going to say, okay, perfect. So now you know what bitachon means. That's chapter 1. Now you know who you're putting your reliance on. That's chapter 2. And of course, there was an introduction where he explained to us the benefits of this attribute, of developing this attribute. Now I'm going to tell you the 5 factors that I need you to know to make sure that your bitachon is actual bitachon. And guess what? The first factor that he's going to give us is you have to know those 7 attributes. And he summarizes, he repeats them again. That's the 3rd time he repeats them. And he sums it up by saying, now you'll understand that God is the cause of all causes. Okay. And so we call in this class at the factor number 1 of the 5 factors, causality. That's a way just to remember it, right? God is the cause of God is the cause of all causes. There's nothing else that has any agency, any ability to cause anything in my life or in anybody's life. They cannot accelerate anything. They cannot speed anything up. They can't delay anything. They can't increase. They can't decrease anything in my life. Now, going back to those 7 qualities before we go into the 5 factors, what are those 7 qualities? Number 1, God is compassionate, right? Number 2, he is attentive. Number 3, well, actually, I just said it in this order. Okay, so number 1, he's compassionate. He is strong, like literally like invincible, right? He is all-knowing. He is attentive. Oh no, attentive was 2. Okay, fine. So I'm in already 4. Okay, he's attentive. Then he has sole jurisdiction for him on my life, like complete sovereignty over my life. Again, that's the same idea, a similar idea to the cause of all causes. He has a solid track record, right? He's been with me from beginning till end, knows me better than anybody else, right? That was all knowing, but all knowing. And then on top of that, he's demonstrated that he has a solid track record of sustaining me forever. And finally, he is extremely generous to the deserving and the undeserving. Okay, so now in chapter 3, he goes over those again and he tells us, and you see, therefore, there is absolutely no one who has any power over you. God is the cause of all causes. Factor number 1 that has to be front and center on your mind for your bitachon to be actual bitachon. Factor number 2 is it has to be sincere. It cannot be lip service. It really has to be sincere. Factor number 3 is it has to be exclusivity. So we have causality, we have sincerity, we have exclusivity. Number 4, meaning to say, I think that's obvious, right? But actually let's review it, because it's a natural tendency that we have as human beings to put our trust in so many other things, like our stock portfolio, our career, our diplomas, our boss, our I don't know what, our government, right? No, it has to be, and this is something that he's given us since the very beginning. He's told us at the opening of the book. This is he begins the book saying, in trusting in God alone, right? And that is a very important qualifier. It's in the first sentence of the introduction. All right, so that's exclusivity. Number 4, it's obedience. And we talked about this probably already 2 weeks ago, where the idea is, well, if you know now that he's completely reliable, I mean, by nature, you're going to gravitate to doing what he tells you is the ideal prescription for you to live your best life, right? So it's natural, and it should come naturally, that we will want to connect to him, because again, the whole idea of bitachon is cementing a relationship, right? That is at the root of the word bitachon, tach, which means a plaster. In Spanish, we say cemento, like a cement, okay? So obviously, we're going to want to like really cement that relationship. How do we cement that relationship? By doing Torah mitzvahs, by doing mitzvah, by doing what God wants us to do and has set up for us for our benefit to live the best life that we can, because he is our creator who knows us more than anybody else. Now, factor number 5, the last factor that needs to be in place is, surprise, surprise, effort, right? We have to do something. And he goes on and he tells us, look, even in the days of the man, when the man was coming down from heaven, you had to do something to put it in you had to lift it up and put it in your mouth. In fact, if you what's it called? You had to walk even outside the camp. So the more bitachon you had, the less you had to do, which, by the way, it's a very important idea. And it's something that those of you who have learned the Beis Halevi with me know that there is an inverse relationship between bitachon and effort and shtadlus. So now he's going to tell us, look, in this world, you're going to have to do something. That is the way God designed the world. Now, the question is, well, why is it that I have to do something? Because God could have designed the world any other way. Why is it that God wants me to be doing stuff in order to gain the things that are external to me, right? He created me in a way that I have to go out and look for my sustenance. He created me in a way that I have to go out and look for a spouse in order to procreate. He created me in a certain way that I have needs external to me. He could have made it a completely different way. And he tells us in chapter 3 that there are two reasons. And again, I'm summarizing so that you guys know where we are holding. Okay, so there are going to be 2 reasons. Reason number one is that he's testing us. Testing us what? Testing us to see if we are going to choose the straight and narrow path, right? Again, going back to the obedience. If he's told us how to live our best life, right? He's giving us the ability to make a choice, to say, okay, I have to go about finding these needs, right? Satisfying these needs. There's going to be options. I could do it the right way, or God forbid, I could do it the not kosher way, right? So reason number 1 is he wants us to actually make a choice. And so it's a test for us to become strong and actually make the right choice. And by the way, he's going to talk about choices a little bit further down, and we're going to understand where in life we do have choices and where in life we don't have choices. Number 2 is he's giving us the opportunity to put our head where it needs to be. Because if we are not preoccupied with meeting these needs, we are going to be preoccupied with something, right? It's like, think of the pit, right? The classic sikha that the Lubavitcher Rebbe of the pit, Yosef's pit, like the brothers threw him in the pit, and the pit is full of what's it called? Scorpions, snakes and scorpions. Or did I add the snakes? It was only scorpions. Okay, I'm right now I can't remember. I'm very, very tired. But the point being that I can't remember what it was now, but the point being, when you leave an empty place, right, it's going to get filled with something, and very likely it's not going to be something good. When people are bored and they're not doing something productive, the tendency is they are going to get in trouble. So in order for us to contribute to this plan of making this world a better place and being a partner with our creator, he gives us the opportunity to actually do something productive and not have, in Spanish, we say like, what is it? Pájaros preñados. Like, don't have your head where it doesn't need to be. Have the head focus on what you need to do, and that's going to lead you to actions where it need to be. Okay, so it's a test, and it's an opportunity to choose to do productive things and a test to do the right thing. Okay, so those are the 2 reasons that he gives us. Now he says there's perfectly righteous people who don't need these 2 things, because by nature or by work, either by design or by really working on themselves, they became people, or they are people who would obviously pass the test and would obviously only be engaged in doing positive, constructive things in the world and not destructive things, right? So if that's the case, then according to this reasoning, these people don't have to exert effort, right? If the only reason Hashem put effort is because of these reasons, then we could say, okay, so whoever doesn't meet doesn't need this test because they'll always pass them, then they don't need to put effort. That seems to be the logic. And that's in fact what he's going to tell us right now. Page number 89, for those of you who are following inside the book, we're using the Fellig edition in this class. The righteous person, when man does not need to toil. The author continues by saying that in instances where the two aforementioned reasons do not apply, right? Those two reasons I told you, God will ensure that the person will not require effort to provide for his needs. So if a person strengthens himself in the service of God, choosing to be fearful of him and to rely on him with regard to both Torah and worldly matters, additionally, if he turns away from inappropriate character traits and instead strives toward good character traits, and he does not rebel against God, even at times when he is at rest from his stresses and does not turn towards leisure. So even when he's like completely at ease, right? Rather, he constantly involves himself with the service of God. He's always preoccupied with the good, productive things. What do I need to do for my creator? Like, where am I needed? You know, like I say to people, like every morning when you say God, Mother Annie, think, okay, God, use me today. Like, where do you need me today? Right? Okay, so this person is like completely focused on serving his creator. He's not being swayed by his evil inclination or the indulgences of the world. Then, in turn, such a person will be relieved from the need to exert himself in the search to obtain his sustenance. For the two reasons mentioned above regarding why a person is required to make efforts to provide for himself for the purpose of testing of man by God to see whether he will choose permitted or forbidden means of obtaining his needs, and so that a person will not rebel due to the goodness that he enjoys, do not apply to him. These two reasons, the test and the opportunity, I guess it's a positive way of saying, like, do not rebel, right? To do the right thing and not do the wrong thing by getting concerned and doing things that are not productive, right? A person has to be busy. These two things don't apply to him. Instead, he will be sustained without any exertion of right work or hard work. So a tzaddik apparently doesn't have to, factor number 5 doesn't apply to them, right? They don't have to put effort. According to his needs and sustenance, as it is written, the Lord will not starve the soul of the righteous. Now, everybody probably is listening, I hope, and asking a very obvious, important question, which is, well, there's plenty of very righteous individuals who did have to toil significantly to find their sustenance, right? We all have seen it generation after generation. They're in the Gemara, they're in our history, they're like, so what is going on here, right? That's the question that every reader is going to think. And Rabbeinu Bachya, which is a hallmark of this text, and I would say probably of the whole Chovos HaLevavos, is constantly predicting what we're going to think, preempting it, and giving us an answer so that we don't get lost. Okay, so he's already preempted the question, and because he knows this is a very troubling question, because we are all, especially because we have a negative side who's going to resist this bitachon thing, because right, there's a side to us that wants us to not be connected to something that is not tangible, right? And be really tethered to this world and to our assets and our abilities and all the thing, right? Then it's going to always look for evidence and really fight this idea of bitachon. So we're all going to ask the question, look, I know this guy and my brother-in-law is such a tzaddik, and this person, look everything they have to go through. It can't be. This thing cannot be true. So what he's going to do is he's going to tell us a few reasons why, not why, but a few possibilities so that we calm down. Okay, he's first going to tell us, look, the question you're asking, there's nothing new under the sun. It's been asked many, many, many times for thousands of years. The prophets, the most righteous individuals, asked the question. And guess what? They didn't get an answer. But, however, there's going to be a few options that I'm going to give you so that you at least settle your mind and open yourself to the possibility that not everything in life you're going to understand, and that there are things that are of the heavens, and there are things that are for here, right? Which, by the way, he already told us a little bit earlier in chapter 3. Okay. And so I'm going to give you some possibilities so that you at least can like settle yourself a little bit enough that we can go on this journey. Because if I don't settle your mind, you're not going to, it's just, you're going to get stuck in this point, and I need to get you to a point of bitachon. So in order to do that, that's why I said sometimes the author makes like some sort of like interjection that if you don't understand the context of where this is coming from, you can read it and say, what is happening here? I'm lost. Okay. So now you understand why this is coming up right here in the middle of effort, right? In the middle of factor number 5. Okay. So page 91, the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper. If a person will say, we do see some righteous people whose sustenance only becomes available to them after much hard work and toil, while we find many sinners who are at peace and live good and pleasant lives, right? And in our modern history, hello, we know, right? Like we know, like what those crazy people and those terrorists and these Qatar be like, what? Like how is this possible, right? How can this be? When we explained earlier that the righteous are not required to make efforts to pursue their livelihood, we will respond by saying that the prophets and the pious have already preceded us in questioning this matter. For example, Jeremiah said, why has the way of the wicked prospered? Another prophet said, why do you show me iniquity and look upon mischief without repaying the wicked? Like, hello, God, do you know what you're doing, right? Plunder and violence are before me, and the one who bears quarrel and strife endures. And he continues in the following verse, for a wicked man surrounds the righteous, and he said, why are you silent when a wicked man swallows up one more righteous than he? Again, he's giving us all these times that this question has been asked, right? It's a big question. Another said, King David in Psalms actually said, behold, these are the wicked, and they are ever tranquil. They have gained much wealth. And he said in the following 2 verses, surely I have purified my heart in vain and washed my hands in cleanliness, for I was afflicted all day, and my rebuke came each morning. Another prophet related about the people of his generation, they also tempt God, and they have nevertheless escaped. And there are many other similar verses. So the question of why the righteous suffer while the wicked prosper is a recurring one in scripture. And I'm sure all of us ask the question, right? Yet, while the prophets asked this question, they did not offer a response that explains the reason. So if you don't know the answer, it's because we have not been given the answer. Don't feel like, oh, somebody shortchanged me in Judaism and they didn't tell me what's, no, none of us know the answer, okay? They didn't give us an answer. Why did they not give us an answer? This is because the reason that a particular righteous person is tested with poverty and a particular wicked person experiences good in this world is different for each. Meaning to say, we cannot give a blanket answer for everybody. The way God works is individual for each individual. So the way he metes out consequences is as unique as every individual. So there's no way for us to understand a general reason why this is so. We have to know that it's individualized, okay? Therefore, this matter is merely commented in general terms when it says, in Devarim, it says, the hidden things belong to the Lord our God, but the revealed things apply to us and our children. Similarly, King Solomon, the wise man, said, if you see oppression of the poor and deprivation of justice and righteousness in the province, wonder not about the matter. Don't dwell on this because this is a question that is beyond our understanding, right? And the verse says, the deeds of the mighty rock are perfect, for all his ways are trust. This is what you need to know. You need to know whether you understand it or not. You're a limited creation. So by definition, you're not going to know everything of how the creator operates. Of course, we have a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah from the Rambam to know God, and we have to work in knowing and understanding Hashem. But we also have the understanding that we're never going to grasp him completely. So these things are for the heaven, right? And what you do need to know, what you can grasp, and if you learn about your creator, you will in fact come to the logical conclusion, just like he told us in chapter 2, that God is my rock. There's no option. He is the only rock, and his deeds are perfect. and all his deeds are just. Do I understand how, in what way? No. But a person can get to that level of understanding. But it is so. Even if I can't tell you from a human perspective how that is so, I can tell you that there are spiritual reasons and it makes it so. Okay, beautiful. Now, he's going to tell us some possibilities of why these righteous people suffer. Notwithstanding the above, oh, wait. So these verses state that the ways of God are fair, but it is beyond our ability to understand them. Okay. So notwithstanding this, the author offers some explanations as to why we sometimes find that the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper. Okay. Nonetheless, I have seen a need, right, to explain this matter, why some righteous people suffer while some wicked people prosper, in such a matter that the explanation should be somewhat sufficient. Like I told you before, he needs to give us something to kind of calm us down. Like it's in a way that it's going to be somewhat sufficient for our minds. I will say that the reasons why the righteous person's livelihood is withheld from him until he exerts himself to obtain it and is tested in it are as follows. Number one, possibility number one, it could be because of a sin that he committed previously for which he was liable to be punished. As the verse states, behold, the righteous man will pay for his sins on earth. So we again don't know when we see a situation and when we see an individual, we obviously, because we're limited and we don't have the 7 qualities of God, which makes us highly unreliable, right? We have no way of knowing what the full story is on a person. So we don't know of a person in the past as something for which he deserves there's a consequence coming, right? And the consequence might be meted out in this world, and we'll see later on. And sometimes it's given here so that he doesn't have to give him the consequence in the world that is even more worthwhile than this one, infinitely more worthwhile than this one, the world to come. Okay, so maybe there's something why there's a transgression, why the person had to suffer in this world. Now, possibility number two, and remember, these are all possibilities. There are some righteous people who suffer in exchange for increased reward in the world to come, as it is written, to benefit you in your end. So sometimes God has to do it this way in order so that he can give us a credit over there. So take it now, deduct it now so that I can increase over there where it's important. Sometimes God desires to give a person a greater reward in the world to come than he otherwise deserves. God does this by causing him to suffer in this world, which causes him to deserve a greater reward in the world to come. In this instance, the righteous person's suffering is not a form of punishment at all. Rather, it is a display of God's love towards that person. And by the way, in all of them, it's a display of love, whether we understand it or not. Because again, the first quality of God is that he's extremely compassionate, loving, has love and empathy and compassion for you. And the 7th quality is that he's extremely generous to the deserving and undeserving. So again, everything that flows from God is pure goodness. Whether it lands to us in the pink package with the pink bow, that's a different story, right? But it's by definition, it cannot be bad. Okay, but we'll get to that when we get there. Okay, number 3. There are some righteous people who suffer to show other people the level of tolerance of his suffering and his good demeanor in the service of his creator, so that other people can learn from him, as we know from the story of Eve. We know that Eve was a person who went through a very, very difficult life. And sometimes there are some individuals that are handpicked in the world to have some trials and tribulations, specifically because it's going to be sort of a role model or a model for all of us to learn how to stay connected to our creator despite trials and tribulations. And we see this, we all know this either from characters in Chumash or from even our own personal lives, okay? And there are people who really in our lives show us how to go through trials and still be completely connected to our creator. And we learn from that. In most cases, it's a great learning opportunity. Hopefully, it's a great learning opportunity for us. Sometimes God causes suffering to the righteous so that by not abandoning their faith or divine service in order to alleviate their pain, they thereby inspire others to likewise never weaken their service of God in the face of hardship. Possibility number 4. There are some righteous people who suffer due to the wickedness of the people of their generation. So sometimes it has to do with the environment. What's going on in the generation? So what's happening here? So the creator tests him, this person, with poverty, want, and illness, or whatever it is, to demonstrate to others his piety and service of God. So it's in contrast to everybody else. This is in contrast to those people who don't serve God despite their peaceful lives. As the verse says, indeed, he bore our illnesses and carried our pains. So the example he's giving us really here in this verse, it alludes to Mashiach, who will endure suffering as a result of the sins of the people of his generation. Just as Mashiach suffers from their sins, the righteous suffer from the sins of his generation. But we can think of other examples. I don't know if they're 100% accurate, but something I was teaching this class in Spanish last night, and something that came to mind is you can see like Avram, for example, right? He was Avram Ha'ivri. He was completely from the other side, right? Like people went zig, he went zag, okay? Right? So in contrast to everybody else, or we can think of like even our matriarch, Rivka, right? She was so in contrast to the environment that she grew up, right? So, and again, we know Avram had a very difficult life, and Rivka also went through her tribulations, etc. Okay, so number 5. There are some righteous people, again, this is another possibility, is the 5th possibility. There are some righteous people who suffer because although righteous in their private lives, they are not zealous for the sake of God in protesting the sins of the people of their generation. As we know from the story of Eli, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and his sons, about whom the verse says, and it will be that everyone who is left in your house will come to prostrate himself before him for a silver piece and a morsel of bread. So let me just backtrack for a second and explain what's going on here. So the 5th possibility is that there's a person who is a righteous individual privately, so to speak. But when they needed to rebuke somebody, when they needed to publicly take a stand, they didn't. And the example, and that and the consequence for that may be that they have to face certain tribulations and trials in terms of materiality in the physical world. And the example he gives us here is of Elia Cohen, because Elia Cohen was supposed to reprimand his sons. Okay, his sons were part of the kahuna, and his sons got involved in taking, I think it was something like taking more from the donations of the Beis Hamikdash than they were supposed to. And I think there was also maybe some immorality and acts maybe with women who came to the temple. I don't remember the exact story, but we all know that Navi is full of these like very racy kind of things that we can all learn messages, lessons for our contemporary life. So, but the idea is that they were not acting to the standard that is expected of Kohanim. And his father needed to reprimand them. He needed to take a stand and condone this behavior. Condone is approved. No, I condemn. I don't know. Whatever. Sometimes I'm very funny with my English. Like it gets twisted with the Spanish, and my husband will look at me like,
Not condone. Condone is approval.
condone is approved, right? So it's condemn. So thank you. Sometimes I need like English correction. Okay. My husband told me the other day, you have a very funny, there's like one thing that you do that just lets everybody know that you have an accent. I'm like, what? Just the way you say the. I don't know. I probably said it wrong. I'm like, okay, so it is what it is. Okay, anyway, he was being cute. He appreciates the accent. Okay, let's go on. So Eli was punished with poverty because he didn't protest the bad behavior of his children. Okay, so it could be that's another possibility. So up to here, he's giving us a few possibilities to say, look, not everything is the way we see it. And there's not going to be one reason, because everybody's meted out. God works but like he mets out consequences in like by design, right? But let me give you some of the possibilities of what could be going on in some of these designs, right? And some of this, so one design is that maybe the person sinned in it before, and so he needs a consequence, so he's given the consequence in this world. Another design is maybe the person is given here the consequence so that God can give him more credit up in the world to come. Maybe another idea is they are going to be an inspiration for others, and they've been handpicked for this to help other people. Maybe another possibility is that these people are actually need to stand in contrast to everybody else in the generation. So it's a bit of a it's sort of like a similar reason, but not exactly the same. And also there could be like a person just didn't really do what they needed to do publicly, even if they were fully righteous in their private life. They didn't exhibit it in a public way. Okay, so now fine, that's one aspect, but why do the wicked need to prosper? So until now, he gave us explanations for why the righteous suffer. Now he turns to discuss why we find that many wicked people prosper and lead pleasant lives. But in the good that God, may he be blessed, performs on behalf of the wicked, are for the but the good, sorry, but the good that God, may he be blessed, performs on behalf of the wicked are for the following reasons. So this is the possible reasons why he gives good to the wicked. Number one, good in a visible in the way that we see good. There are some wicked people who prosper due to their previous good deeds for which God rewards them in this world. Because God God is completely just, right? So if a person did some good, they need to be rewarded for that. But guess what? God gives it to him here where it's worth babkas, right? He doesn't give it to them where it's worth a fortune over there. So yeah, so whatever you want your money, take it here because over there you're not getting a credit. Okay, so as it says in Devarim, and he repays those who hate him to their face to cause them to perish, which one of the early commentators, Onkelos, translated as follows, and he translates like this: and he rewards those who hate him for the good deeds that they have performed before him in this world, in order to ultimately destroy them in the world to come. So he doesn't want to repay them, but he has to, right? He's a fair God. So he gives it to them where it's very cheap. Here it's nothing. Okay, take it, right? Because where it really matters, you ain't getting anything because you're so wicked. Okay, so God does not withhold reward from anyone for the mitzvot that they perform. Of course not. The question is where do they get the reward? Nevertheless, God chooses to reward the wicked for their good deeds in this world so that they will not need to be rewarded in the world to come. Possibility number two, there are some wicked people whose good fortune is like a deposit to be kept by him, and it remains with him until God will give him a righteous son who will be deserving of it. So it's not necessarily for him. It's you're holding it. It's on deposit because you're going to have actually a righteous son, and it's going to be for him. The wicked person only amasses wealth so that his righteous son can inherit it. As the verse states in Eov, he will prepare and a righteous man will wear them. Similarly, King Solomon says in Mishlei, but to the sinner he is given an occupation to gather and to accumulate, to give to him who is good before God. So he's again amassing it now, but it really is to benefit his son. So in this case, the reason why the wicked person is given wealth is solely due to the fact that his son will be righteous and thus deserving of an inheritance. Now, he's going to give us another possibility, and it goes like this. Sometimes the wealth of the wicked, although superficially positive, is actually the cause of their downfall, as the author says. So again, sometimes Hashem is very wise, right? Sometimes he's giving it to the person because that's the way the person's going to trip and finally like get what they deserve. It is possible that the wicked person is given good so that it will be the main cause for his death or his bad fortune, as it is written, riches kept by their owner for his harm. So sometimes the riches that this person is given is actually what's going to destroy them. Additionally, it is possible that possibility number four, it is possible that despite being wicked, the Creator allows him to have good fortune for a while until he repents and will be deserving of it, as we know from the story of King Messiah. I'm sorry, King Messiah, King Manasseh. Okay, so it was not what he was doing, but what he would do later. That's basically what's happening, right? God is patiently waiting for this person to do teshuvah and do the right thing. So he's giving it to him in advance, knowing that they are actually going to turn around. In certain cases where the wicked person will eventually repent, God allows him good fortune even before he repents, as we see with King Manasseh of Judah. Although he was so wicked that he caused massive idolatry among the Jewish people in his kingdom, God did not remove his kingdom from him because God knew that he would ultimately repent, as is recorded in Chronicles. Okay, the possibility number 5. There are some wicked people who might be given good fortune due to an act of kindness that his father performed, and therefore it is fitting for God to be kind to the son as a result. So First, we said, oh, there's a possibility that it's because you're going to have a son who might inherit it. Now he's telling us the opposite. Maybe your ancestor, maybe you come from a father or a grandfather who had so much merit that you're still getting the dividends from the merit of your ancestor, right? So you're getting whatever it is that you're getting, the person is getting because it was an act of kindness that their father performed, and therefore you're getting it. In this case, the person is rewarded for his ancestors' good deeds. A number of verses are now quoted as proof that God rewards a person's children for the good deeds of their ancestors. So, as God said to Yehu, son of Nimshi, he was actually a good king. He said, your descendants of the fourth generation shall occupy the throne of Israel, and he who walks innocently is righteous. Fortunate are his sons after him. Similarly, it says, I was young, I also aged, and I have not seen a righteous man forsaken and his children seeking bread. Now he's going to give us a sixth possibility, and that is that there are some wicked people who God make prosper for the purpose of testing who is pretending to be righteous to deceive others, and who is hiding their wickedness out of fear of other people. So what happens is that when these people see the success of the wicked, so there's people who really publicly they seem to be very righteous, but really inside they're very wicked. So what happens is when a person like this sees that wicked people actually succeed materially, then their true colors come out. They actually then go that way. They say, forget this being good. I'm going where the money is, right? They hasten to turn away from the service of the Creator and try to appease the wicked and learn from their ways. They say, okay, I'm going that way. I'm going to attach myself to those people because look, they're getting the good stuff. As a result, it's going to become clear which people are wholehearted in their service of God when they tolerate the times when others rule over them and embarrass them for it. They will be rewarded by the Creator for this, as we know from the story of Elijah, who was pursued by Jezebel, and similarly with Jeremiah, who was persecuted by the rulers of his generation. In this instance, the wicked are prosperous in order to tempt those people who until now were only wicked in private. Now they're going to be tempted to do so in public so that others will be aware of their true colors. Okay. So up to here, this ends a whole intersection, because at this point he says, okay, I've given you enough. Now I got to take you back to bitachon. Okay. Now I got to take you back to effort. We are in point number 5. You have to know factor number 5, that you need to put effort in this world. So if we told me that I have to put effort in this world, and you gave me the 2 reasons why God created the system so that there need to be effort involved, and I realize that there's some people who don't need to put effort, and I also realize that there's going to be people who don't meet this paradigm, and actually even though they meet the conditions, they don't meet the conditions to put effort, therefore they don't need to put it, and there are those who are wicked and prosper. I still need to put effort, right? Then my question is, where in the world do I put effort? Like, if the world has all sorts of possibilities for me, how do I know in which area of life to exert myself? Now you explain to me that, okay, fine. There's effort. Effort is needed. And I'm not the type of person who's going to pass the test, but I also, but I'm not going to pass the 2 tests, the 2 conditions, right? I'm going to be one of those people who needs to put effort. Where do I put my effort? And by the way, even like he said, even if you pass the test, there are times where people pass the test and they still need to, like the righteous who suffer, they still need to be involved. Okay, so now the question is a very important question. You need to settle your mind, and you need to go back to the ikar, the main thing that's being taught here, which is effort. Where do I put my effort? So he's going to give us the answer, and it's a very beautiful answer. Choosing an occupation. What do you love doing? Okay, so having established the necessity for a person to engage in various means to obtain his livelihood and other needs, the author now addresses the type of occupation a person should choose, as well as the proper attitude towards it. Because one thing is that you choose it, right? And the other thing is that you have to have the right attitude towards it. You have to understand that you're here to contribute, right? That this is not just about making the money. This is not just about making a livelihood. This is about contribution. This is about serving your Creator in this world, making a dwelling place for God in this world, right? So you have to have once you know where you need to be, then you have to joyfully be engaged in that service because it's an act of service, right? Again, because God asked us to do it. It's factor number 5. It's part of the paradigm. For us to be reliant on the Creator, He demands that we be involved. Therefore, instead of taking it as, oh, this is a necessary evil, I have to do it, it's completely the opposite. It's not a necessary evil that I have to go out to work. It's actually a form of divine service that I have to go out to work, right? So that's my attitude. It's a complete paradigm shift. Okay. That's the Jewish attitude. So how do I choose an occupation first? Since it has been demonstrated above that people are obligated to make efforts to engage in the means of obtaining their livelihood and other needs, we will now explain that not every person is obligated to pursue every means of obtaining a livelihood, as there are many means in which a person can engage. We're not meant to take everything. No, it's not. No, you're meant to choose something. So how do you choose? There are many different means. Some of those means are relatively easy because they entail little exertion, such as selling merchandise in the store or engaging in types of handiwork that involve little labor, such as sewing, weaving, writing, or safeguarding merchandise until it goes up in value. Other examples of easy occupations include those who contract sharecroppers and other workers to work the land, and those who are responsible to oversee workers who work the land. Now, we could all see this list and say, you know what? Now, today, running a store is actually could be a really, laborious task. But this is relatively speaking. When you see the other examples that he's going to give us, oh yeah, relative to other career or other occupations that are out there, yeah, this is relatively easy. For example, there are other means of obtaining a livelihood, that involve much toil and exertion, such as tanning skins, mining iron and copper from the depths of the earth. I mean, who wants that job, right? Refining silver by using lead, lifting heavy loads, regular long distance travel, working the land and plowing it, and the like. So everything is out there. There's the relatively easier, there's the relatively harder. Which one should a person choose? Well, the answer is it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the type of person he is by nature, by design. How did God design him? For a person who is physically strong but intellectually weak, it is appropriate that he chooses one of these occupations that require toil, but only as much as he can tolerate. So the first category of occupations mentioned may be relatively easy, but they require skill, right? It might be that they require a tremendous amount of mental exertion, but a person might be wired for that. A person might be of a high intellectual capacity, but they might not be very, very strong. It's very funny because recently with God forbid, this terrible, horrific fires, one of these reporters, I really like her. She's a very conservative lady. And she was saying something so funny. I don't really watch the news, but sometimes on my feed, these things come up and I get sucked into them. And my husband's like, you see, it's like you're watching TV, God forbid. Okay. So she was saying, look, if I'm in a fire, because we're criticizing this whole concept of what's it called? Diversity, inclusion, equity, and inclusion, right? Like, if I'm in a fire, I want a strong fireman to come rescue you. I want a guy who can climb those stairs and grab me and hold me and take me down. Like, duh. I don't need a lady. I'm not built to be a fireman. Can you imagine? Can you imagine I got hired for the fire department? There's no way I can take anybody. I'm a 5'4", 100-pound lady. And so it's Michelle. So she was saying, it just doesn't make any sense, right? And this is exactly where he's going to tell us. You cannot put Yael Trusch to be saving lives in fires. You can put her to write beautiful articles. You can put her to write books. You can put her to do courses, to teach things online, to give seminars and lectures, right? All these things that many other people might not even tolerate. They might not like them. They might not have the ability, and they might not be, it might be torturous to them, right? I have a good friend is like, please don't ask me to write. You write it for me, because she cannot write for the life of her, right? You give it to me in 30 seconds. It's a beautiful paragraph, right? Right. So it's an ability. It's not that one is better than the other. It's that everybody's created with a certain set of abilities, and they're all needed. But in order to to make this world the way it has to be, to take it to ultimate perfection, we all have to contribute in the way that we are needed, right? And we, by design, our design is going to determine how we are needed. So those firemen are very, very important. And thank God that God made them very, very strong, right? And they need to be strong, right? And so it is. So now we continue on page 100. Number one, page 100. Conversely, a person who is physically weak but has strong intellect should not pursue those means of livelihood that tire out the body. Instead, he should turn to occupations that are easier on the body so that he will continually be able to engage in them. So you have a guy who's very, very strong, right? And is very good with his hands and, but he doesn't have, maybe he's not, doesn't have the intellectual ability in like mathematics, or like, he doesn't have the patience to sit and model and crunch out numbers. So you cannot put that guy or that in that type of occupation. You can't give him my husband's job. Like, you have to put him to be a contractor or a carpenter, really things that he can use his mind and his hands and his strength, right? You can't put my husband, who's extremely cerebral and intellectual, and he's not a very strong guy. He's 5'8", he's thin, right? To do contract work and carpentry and heavy lifting, all that. It's not the way it is, right? Okay. So in truth, every person, aside from the fact that we are made up in a certain way, every person has more of a desire. There's going to be a preference for one type of work or commerce than others, which God has ingrained in his very nature to love and to cherish. So up until now, he's talking to us about a capacity. There's a capacity and a tolerance that we have for certain type of work. Not only that, but we have a preference. We have an inclination naturally, right? I naturally gravitate towards communication, whether it be spoken or written. I naturally do not gravitate towards, I don't know. I couldn't be a nurse. Sherry's a nurse. I couldn't be a nurse. Or like my husband says, I'm very mathematical. I'm very good with science, but I cannot see blood. So don't put the guy in medical school. You can't, right? You just can't. But if a person has a high tolerance for other people's pain, right? And for blood and all the things that entails, then therefore that is where they need to be of service. But you can't put me in that profession because I also can't tolerate it, okay? And I'm not inclined to it. I'm not curious. I don't devour this. I don't find it interesting. I don't read about it, right? It's just not where I gravitate to. So a person naturally gravitates towards certain things. So they have the capacity for certain things, it's built in them, and they have also built in them the gravitas, the preference, the inclination towards them. Although earlier we said that a person should choose an occupation based on his strength and intellect, in truth, if a person turns away from his greed for wealth and remains content with only pursuing his genuine needs, then in choosing an occupation, he will find that by nature, he gravitates towards the occupations that befit him. So now he's going to give us actually an example from nature, from the world of nature, the animal kingdom, to demonstrate how this is the way God made the world. And this is the way that he also made us. Similarly, we find by other living creatures that God ingrained the means with which they sustain themselves into their very nature. For example, he ingrained in the nature of a cat to prey on mice, in the nature of the hawk to prey on those birds that are fitting for it, and in the nature of deer to prey on snakes. Similarly, there are certain birds that will only prey on fish. Now, listen to this. There's birds that prey on fish. Well, if the bird's in the air, right? The birds don't live in the water. They fly. So if the bird's going to go into the water to get the fish, how should the bird, ¿cómo se llama? How do you say a beak? No? How do you say the mouth of a bird? Beak, no? How should the beak of the mouth of the bird be? Should it be like a flat thing? Or should it be long so it can grab the skinny thing fish and also go in the water fast and grab it and be able to pull it out? Imagine that God designed it like that, right? Because it's all by design. So even the structure of the body and the limbs of each species is specifically to make them fit for the consumption of the food that it is in their nature to eat, as it is evidenced by the long mouth and the long legs of the bird that prey on fish. So one, he tells us you have an inclination. The cat is going to go after mice. That's what he knows naturally where he needs to go to find his sustenance. Okay, so understand, you also naturally, if you quiet your mind and you get rid of all this meshugas of where's the money and where's it, if you quiet your mind, you're naturally gonna go. You're naturally gonna you're gonna know where you naturally need to be focused on, right? Just like the animals do. Okay, the cat goes towards the mice, the other one goes towards I don't know what, right? Right. And not only that, but your makeup, your physical makeup is going to be designed for this type of way of finding a sustenance, just like the certain type of birds that prey on fish. And you have the teeth and the sharp nails of the lion, right? The lion is going to destroy whatever animal it's going to get, right? Have you seen such a thing in these in the National ¿Cómo se llama esto? What do you call it? National Explorer magazines. I remember as a kid, right? You see these pictures like it's a crazy thing. So in order to do that, to tear apart his prey the way they do, oh yeah, they need very, very strong teeth and very, very sharp nails, right? But then you take a little sheep that's gonna eat, ¿cómo se llama? What do they eat? Grass, right? What do they need? It doesn't, obviously, that's their sustenance. They're not going to need all these things. They don't need the teeth and the nails of a lion because that's not what's needed. Okay. So by the horns of the bull and the ram, because that's what they need. However, for those animals whose food is from vegetation, God did not give them body parts to use as instruments with which to hunt and prey, because it's not necessary. So when we observe the animal kingdom, we see clearly how each species was created with a natural means of obtaining its sustenance, and how their bodies are designed in a way most suited for doing so. Similarly, different people are created with different natures and characters and are suited for different occupations. And this is such a beautiful section of this chapter. It's probably one of my favorite parts of the book. And I wish that every high school and university kid would understand this. And I wish that as parents, we would be able to communicate this in our children, that they don't have to be confused by this meshugas of the world and have to understand that God gave you an inclination and he gave you certain talents and certain like natural like attraction towards certain areas and certain talents and abilities in that area. That's where you need to go. That's where you need to find your means of the sustenance. In a similar manner, you will find that the various character traits of people and the structure of their bodies are each suited for a specific type of business or work. A person who finds that his character traits are suited for a certain work, and that he also desires the work by nature, and that his body is suited for it, and that he's able to tolerate the exertion required for it, should pursue it and make it his means of obtaining a livelihood. That's the formula right there. That's the formula right there. Again, if Sherry can tolerate blood and she can tolerate long shifts and she could tolerate being on her feet and she likes dealing with patients, she likes the ability of being helped, like that's where she needs to be. But you can't ask the person who can't tolerate that or doesn't have the attraction or doesn't have the ability to do it, right? So my husband has, some people don't have high tolerance for like sitting and doing Excel spreadsheets and also dealing with people who change your spreadsheet 100 times and question your numbers a million times and then sitting through very complex negotiations based on numbers, right? So not only does he like the numbers, not only is he very articulate, not only is he very proficient, right? He's very intellectual in that sense, but he also have a high tolerance point for this type of nuance. Now you put me to do that and I'm like, you know what? I'm out of here. So don't talk to me, like I can't deal with that, right? So it's not for me. Upon recognizing that he is both suited for a certain occupation and drawn towards it, he should conclude that this is the means that God has provided him for the pursuit of his livelihood. He should tolerate both its pleasant aspects and its difficult aspects. Like sometimes it's going to be annoying that you have to crunch the numbers 100 times, right? Or they get questioned 100 times. There's going to be times when your means of occupation is not all rosy. Like there are going to be times, I was saying the example yesterday. Yes, writing comes pretty naturally to me, but there are times when it's just, oh, I can't, or I have a due date and my editor is calling me, for example, tonight, right? And I need to hand it in. It's like this pressure and the article's not coming out, like, right? Like there are parts that are not so pleasant, right? But when you know this is where you need to be, he's saying you also need to come to terms with the fact that, okay, not every day is going to be rosy. Not every day your paragraphs are going to come out perfect. Not every day your business model is going to just, all the numbers are going to line up. Not every day you're going to have an easy patient at the hospital, right? Not every patient is going to be gracious. Not every patient's life is going to be saved or whatever it is, right? These are things that come, they're part and parcel of the job, the career that you need to be involved in. And he tells us you need to take both its pleasant parts, the parts that you enjoyed, the parts that are beautiful and wonderful, and that's why you gravitate towards them, and also the parts that are a little bit difficult, okay? He shouldn't become sick with it. I mean, don't become despondent. Don't become sick with it. Understand with joy that this is what you need to do. If at times it doesn't sufficiently provide for sustenance, so there's going to be times where you're going to say, whoa, but is it really? Like, is it really coming through this? Like, I don't see it. No, don't get sick over it. Don't become sick, stressed, despondent. What do? Rather, he should rely on God, that God will provide him with sufficient livelihood for his entire life. So you need to go back to the 7 principles, which is factor number 1 for bitachon to be bitachon. And you need to understand, okay, but I have a God that is reliable, and he's told me that this is the type of means of a livelihood that I need to pursue. Therefore, I can relax about the money. My only concern is how do I make this, how do I do this the best way possible, right? How do I do this a way that I'm actually serving my creator? That's my only concern, because that's the only thing I can control. The rest God is going to send. So a person's preoccupation is, how do I serve Hashem, right? If I have to work, then how do I do it in the best way possible? Well, it has to meet these criteria. And once I've found these criteria, I have to do it joyfully. I have to enjoy it. I have to find creative ways of make it the most beneficial for society, and just not just sit in my laurels. Like, if I'm going to be a nurse, I need to be like an amazing nurse. If I'm going to be a painter, I have to be a great painter, right? I have to put my energy into this, because it's another form of divine service. So he's going to continue on this theme in the next section, and we're going to start that next week. So we're going to leave it off. I'm going to actually put my bookmark. We're going to leave it off in page 103. Any questions, any comments so far? I hope for our new ladies it wasn't too confusing. And again, I'll provide, you can find them on YouTube, but I'll give you at least the maps, like the overviews of the whole book. But any questions or any stories or comments? We're good? Amazing. Everything was clear. How beautiful. Okay, fantastic. So if that's the case, then everybody should have a good Shabbos, and I will see you next week, God willing.